Hi, my name is Eric Berman. I'm the owner and developer of MyFlightbook, the world's most popular free online logbook for pilots. Today, I'm going to be talking about tips and best practices for a great and professional logbook. I need to give a disclaimer here. My goal here is not to get you to use MyFlightbook. It's a free product. I don't make any more money if if more people use it. But I will be using MyFlightbook as the platform for my demonstrations because it's what I know and because it illustrates the points, but it probably applies to any other logbook that you might be using. Yeah, that said, of course, I am biased. I think MyFlightbook is the best one out there, so I hope you use it. Anyhow, just a little bit about myself. I am a recovering tech guy. I used to work at Microsoft and Expedia for about the past 20 years or so. I have been an angel investor in the clean tech sector, and I am the guy behind MyFlightbook. I am a commercially rated instrument pilot with single engine land, single engine sea, multi-engine land privileges. And I just took and passed my ATP written, and I'm hoping to get a 737 rating this year. So I am a pilot like you are. So if you already have all of your logbook on paper, well, first of all, you're missing out on all kinds of stuff, but there's not a lot in here that's going to help you. Maybe the first section where I talk about data hygiene. Otherwise, I would strongly suggest that you see my other talks about how to get started with an electronic logbook. It'll talk about things like how to do bulk import from a spreadsheet or from another logbook program, how to set starting totals if you go in that direction, and it'll point you to companies that help with transcription if you need to. There's a QR code here to the talk that I've given on this at Oshkosh over the years and on the web as well. And I would encourage you to go view that talk and then come back, and this one will be a lot more useful at that time. All right, so I already referenced data hygiene. That's, I think, the first and most important topic to cover. Then I'm going to talk about three sets of people you need to impress or at least report data to. The first is your insurance company or your flying club or local FBO. The second is your examiner when you go for a check ride. And finally, it's the hiring manager when you are preparing for job interviews. All right, data hygiene. I think this is really the most important piece. The data in your logbook is much more important than how that data looks. So I will talk a little bit at the end about how to make your actual presentation look good. But if it's junk data, then it doesn't matter how good it looks. And I certainly wouldn't want to fly for any airline that puts more weight on the appearance of your logbook than on the data it contains. And along those lines, I have had many pilots over the years get airline jobs with all sorts of different presentations of their logbook. The important thing is that you have good data in your logbook. So I'm going to talk about that first. I'm probably going to spend the most amount of time on that. All right, so let me talk about 10 common data hygiene issues. There's no particular order here, but these are just the kinds of things that many people will often get wrong in their logbooks. The first is basic data errors. So this includes things like transposing digits, put in 2.3 instead of 3.2, missing a decimal point where it just didn't go in, and so you have a 3.2-hour flight and you log 32 hours of PIC time on that flight. Misreading the format. Some people prefer to use hours and minutes. Some people prefer to use decimal, or sometimes you're using a data source that uses one or the other and it's not what you intended. But 1:25 is 85 minutes. 1.25 is 75 minutes. So it's important to get those straight. People will often short themselves on PIC or SIC or dual time on a flight. And in that vein, in many parts of the world, every flight must satisfy the equation that your SIC time plus your PIC time plus your dual time must equal your total time. Now, that's not true if you're in the US under FAA rules, because under FAA rules, you can log PIC time if you're rated for the aircraft and you are manipulating the controls. And so for many people, the entire process of earning their instrument rating, for example, allows them to log PIC and dual time at the same time, which obviously double counts, if you will, if you were to try to make that equation hold true. But outside the US, in that scenario, you would log dual and you would not be able to log PIC. There is, in many countries, no distinction between being the PIC and logging PIC. All right. Simulator errors. There are a bunch of these, so I'm going to split this over a few slides. Number one is time logging errors. So the first thing is that you should not be logging PIC or SIC time or total time in a sim. So if you look at 61.1, so again, this is FAA rules. Outside of the US, your mileage may vary, but flight time, which is what the total time field is the pilot time that commences when an aircraft moves under its own power for the purposes of flight and ends when the aircraft comes to a rest after landing, or a similar thing for a glider. Well, a simulator is not an aircraft. It doesn't move on, and it's certainly not under its own power. Therefore, flight time, you can't log it in a simulator according to the FAA rules, at least according to my read of them. And then later on, it goes 6151 goes on to say that logging pilot and command flight time tells you that it's a subset of flight time. So if you can't log flight time in a sim, you can't log PIC time. And it says the same thing about SIC time as well. Simulated instrument versus actual instrument, IMC, instrument meteorological conditions. Yeah, this one's not that big a deal if you log one versus the other, but you can only experience IMC in IMC. If you're in a simulator, it is simulated. So you should log simulated instrument if you're in an aircraft and you're under the hood, or you should log simulated instrument if you are in a simulator and flying by reference to the instruments, but you should never log IMC in a simulator. Cross-country time is time acquired during flight. So again, that can't be done in a simulator. Can you log dual time in a sim? Sure, why not? Can you log, or at least at least ground instruction? Can you log night flight? Sure, I guess. I don't know. I don't think that those things are as clearly spelled out. But the main ones that you don't want to do are PIC, SIC, and total time. I do get emails from people periodically who say, oh, you know, I've got 1,000 hours of time, but I need to back out my 50 hours of simulator time. How do I do that? And my answer to them is always remove the total flight time from those flights and log it in the ground sim field. That's what the ground sim field is for. You are not, in that scenario, a 1,000-hour pilot. You are a 950-hour pilot, and your logbook should reflect that. Another thing for sims is that you are supposed to log the sim's details. 6151B1 says that you're supposed to have the location and the type and identification. So in my flight book, at least, there is a field titled Simulator Training Device Identifier that shows up automatically whenever a sim is selected as the aircraft, if you will, for an entry. And that's the right place to put, oh, this was at flight safety in Denver, serial number 123, FAA registration ABC. And the nice thing is that that field will automatically autocomplete to previously used values. So if you visit the same sim multiple times, data entry is really easy. It's also a really good idea to log some ground instruction when you receive that in a sim. All right, there are more common sim errors. The last one is confusing BATD, AATD, FTD, and FFSs. So Or BATD is a basic aviation training device. AATD is an advanced aviation training device. FTD is a flight training device. And a full flight, FFS is a full flight simulator. Don't ask me what the difference is in the certification. I don't know, but just tell me which one you're using. All of these can contribute to instrument currency. There are, of course, also, I should add, uncertified simulators like Microsoft Flight Sim that are wonderful and have all kinds of benefits, but you can't use them for things like instrument currency. But only a full flight simulator or some FTDs can contribute to passenger currency, and then only under Part 142. So this distinction also will matter for flight time credit towards some ratings. So a rating might require, for example, that you have 50 hours of time in a multi-engine airplane, and it will allow you to credit up to a certain amount of time towards that in a simulator towards that requirement. And I do want to just draw that distinction that doesn't mean that it counts as, in that case, multi-engine aircraft time. It counts towards the requirement. So in my specific case, I'm going for my ATP. I have 39.8 hours in Senecas. So that's all of my multi-engine aircraft time that's in real aircraft. I also have 6 hours in a full flight sim that represents a multi-engine aircraft. So I have effectively 45.8 hours towards that 50 hours requirement, and I'll get more when I actually go for the rating. But that does not mean that I am a 45.8 hour multi-engine time pilot. I am a 39.8 hour multi-engine pilot. All right, enough with sims. Let's talk about cross-country. Pop quiz. Which of these are cross-country flights? I'm doing this in a recording right now, so I don't have the audience interaction, but I'll do this anyhow. So the first one is, I fly from Los Angeles to San Francisco and I land at San Francisco. And when I give this talk in person, lots of heads nod. Yes, everyone agrees. That's a cross-country flight. I fly a helicopter from Payne Field, which is near me just outside of Seattle, to Bremerton, which is about 30 nautical miles, and I land at Bremerton. And this is in a helicopter. And when I ask this, some heads nod, some heads don't. I fly an airplane from Payne to Arlington. So this one's about 15 nautical miles, and I land at Arlington. Is that cross country? Most people shake their head no. I depart and return to Seattle, but I do a low approach with no landing at Portland, Oregon, about 110 nautical miles away. Is that a cross-country flight? And most people will typically shake their head no. I'm assuming keying off of the no landing. And the answer is that the first one is pretty much always a cross-country flight. The second one is pretty much always a cross-country flight. The third one could be, and the last one could be. It all depends. Because if you look at Part 61, where cross-country flight is defined, a cross-country flight is one that basically departs at A and lands at B, no matter how far away, unless there's a minimum distance required or unless you have to land somewhere else. And all of those unless exceptions depend on the context in which you're asking about the cross-country flight. So if you're going for a rating, you might have to do 50 nautical miles if it's in an airplane, or 25 nautical miles if it's in a helicopter. And in some cases, it just has to be 50 nautical miles and no landing is even required for that rating. It's kind of a mess. So my suggestion is don't bother logging any cross-country unless it counts towards a rating. So that would be 50 nautical miles for airplanes, 25 nautical miles for helicopters. Just don't bother. For the shorter flights, your basic cross-country, you can search your logbook to find those. So there's no need to explicitly log it. It's just clutter. And so you just search for non-local flights, and the system will find all the flights that go from A to B, and right there you have your basic cross country that goes from A to B, which is obviously going to be a higher number. And you'll be able to see all the totals. You'll be able to see your PIC time for such flights. You'll be able to see your night time for such flights and so forth. If you want, you can also tag a flight with one of these properties that indicates it was cross country over some threshold distance or under some threshold distance. The only one of these that I think really kind of matters is the cross country time over 50 nautical miles with no landing, because no, non-local will still pick that up. No, non-local will not pick that up, because you could depart Seattle and arrive at Seattle, and that's a local flight. But if you went over 50 nautical miles, it would miss that. So that one you might want to do. You'll see a QR code up here in the corner. That is a link to a blog post that I've done on this topic that goes into a little bit more depth, and some of my rants about the FAA's definition of cross country. All right, night flight. Not a lot to say here, but just remember that in the US, for night currency, your landings must be to a full stop. So that's actually why, at least on my flight book, the full stop night landings field is so prominently placed, and night touch and goes and things like that is buried a little bit more deeply in the system. You also need night takeoffs too. Yeah, 6157A also for regular currency also requires them, but come on, every flight has them, and pilots are really lazy about logging them. On my flight book, if I see 3 full stop night landings in a 90-day window and I don't see any night takeoffs anywhere in your logbook, then I'm going to assume that you just don't log your night takeoffs very well. And so I will declare you to be current by 6157B, but I'll give you a warning that I didn't find those night takeoffs. And so you'll see that right by your currency. If I find so much as 1 night takeoff anywhere in your logbook, then I know you know how to log them, and they suddenly become completely required. So if I see those 3 full stop night landings in the 90-day period and I don't see the takeoffs, I'm not going to declare you current. Another thing is that night landings actually require night flight. It's amazing how many logbooks I see where an entry records a full stop night landing, but there's no night flight on the flight. And it's like, okay, how did you do that? For a long time, I treated this as an actual error on the system. I wouldn't let you save the flight, but I do allow it because, oh my God, it's amazing how many scenarios look wrong that have some weird edge case where it actually is allowable. So I allow it, but I'll show in a few moments how I warn about it as being a potential gotcha. Then the other thing that you'll run into is combination time. How do I log night PIC time or night cross-country time or things like that? And my answer on this, and this might be my flight book specific, is don't. And I'll talk more about this in a few minutes, but just if you had a half hour of night on a flight, log a half hour of night. And if it was a cross-country flight, log the cross-country time. If you were the PIC, log the PIC time. Don't try to log the actual combinations. In fact, for the most part, my flight book disallows it. There is no way to explicitly log it. I'll come back to this. All right, a few comments about logging instrument flying. The first one is people logging simulated instrument in an aircraft, but no safety pilot was identified. 6151 requires that if you're logging instrument flight, you're under a view limiting device in VMC, you need a safety pilot. Now, if you're an IMC, presumably you better be in the system. Okay, no problem. But if you're logging simulated instrument and it's in an aircraft, that means that you were under the hood. That means you were supposed to have somebody else with eyes outside the airplane. You're supposed to identify them. So you do want to make sure that you do that. Second piece about instrument flying is logging approaches correctly. You are supposed to log location and type. So you can put that in the comments, and if you do that, that's totally fine. You've met both the letter and the spirit of the regulation. I can't tell that you did that necessarily because it's free form text. So you could, have it completely in your own words. And I don't know whether or not I don't have the AI system built in to recognize that in the remarks. So I have a designated field called approach names where you should log that. And I even have a little approach helper that generates the descriptions and fills in that field for you. So you can pick from little drop downs because it knows the runways and it knows the airports you visited. And you can put in things like here, it's compact, but it's to ILS Yankee, runway 16 right at Payne Field. But there's nothing magical about that particular abbreviated format. That's just what I put together, and it's just nice and compact. So you are supposed to do that. Make sure that you do. Now, another thing that many pilots like to do, but it is not required by the regulations, is you might also choose to log. I did 3 ILS approaches. I did 1 VOR approach. 2 of those 4 approaches were coupled. 2 of them were hand flown, and all kinds of information like that. And that's great because you can see how many ILS approaches you've done and how many VOR approaches and so forth and so on. But none of that is regulatory, and none of that is important for computing your instrument currency. The things that I'm looking for instrument currency is I just want to know the total number of approaches you performed on a flight. And that's just in its own field. It's just a number. I want to know whether or not you did holding, and I want to see that you described the approaches. That's really it. All of the other stuff is just for your own personal benefit. Solo time. Surprising how many people actually have issues here. The first is that people who log PIC, and because they're a student pilot on their solo flights, and they're wondering why ratings progress isn't picking that up. PIC does not mean you were solo. It means that you were pilot in command. If you were solo, yeah, you probably were PIC, but I can't look at a flight and determine that you were solo just from the fact that you were PIC. So just don't log solo if there's another human being on board. Here's where I also have to point out an idiosyncrasy in the regs, particularly around solo time towards a commercial rating. The commercial rating under FAA rules allows you to substitute duties of PIC with an instructor on board for solo time. It's an allowed substitution, but it is not solo time. You can use one or you can use the other. The QR code here has a link to my blog post with a lot more detail. It gets into the weeds. It's a little bit of esoterica. It references a few legal opinions from the FAA, but I just want to allude to that here. And finally, ground training. I already mentioned the ground instruction received field. That's a great thing to use. You can have, I'll usually log it on the flight where that is associated with that ground instruction. So for example, a flight review is supposed to have an hour of ground training associated with it. And so I'll just log an hour of ground instruction received with my flight review. Or if you want to have a separate entry for that, that's totally fine. Just use any aircraft. All the flight times are 0, so it doesn't matter what aircraft you used. If you like, on my flight book, there's also a generic ground aircraft you can use. The question I often get asked is, why can't I just leave the aircraft blank? And the answer to that is because the flight is tied to the aircraft, and the aircraft is tied to a model, and the model is how I determine things like multi-engine time, single engine time, turbine time, helicopter time, tail wheel time, all of that. And so you can't not have an aircraft, at least the way I do it. Yeah, because on my flight book, at least, you can't log single engine time. You can't log multi-engine time. It's all implied by the aircraft. And so a result of that is you can't not have an aircraft. And notice what I didn't mention in all of this data hygiene issues, arithmetic errors. Computers don't make addition errors. Now, I would be a terrible nerd if I didn't point out that you can have two kinds of rounding errors in some circumstances. Well, one kind of rounding error in two different circumstances. But so if you're logging to the 10th of an hour, you will never have a rounding error. You will never have any kind of a rounding error because 1/10 of an hour is 6 minutes. And so everything, whole minutes and whole tenths play nicely together. My flight book by default, though, does all of its math to the minute. So all quantities I round to the nearest minute and before I add them. So if you're using two decimal places for your times, you might see some small, very small rounding errors. They generally cancel each other out because that second digit, hundredths of a minute, is smaller than hundredths of an hour is smaller than a minute. And so you can get a little bit of rounding error from 0.11 hours versus 0.12 hours. That's a 36-second difference. On my flight book, there is an option to use per hundredth of an hour math. So in other words, to do it to two decimal places. And so then you'll again you'll have no rounding error whatsoever. It will all work perfectly. But if you're using two decimal places and mixing that with per minute math, you could see some rounding errors. Okay, that was way more in the weeds than I intended to do. Let's get to some demos. And I'm going to show you the check flights feature. And that is, let me go over here to Logbook. So here I have a sample logbook. And the idea behind check flights is to find all of these things that don't rise to the level of error, but that are things that I want you to take a second look at to make sure that they're okay. So I have a sample logbook here. It's only got 3 flights in it. And I'm going to go logbook, check flights. And it's got to think for a second. And what it's going to do is it's going to scan my logbook for for any of, I should say, over 200, I think now, different checks, different things that might be wrong. Here, let me make this just a little bit bigger. Hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to read. All right, so you'll see that there are 8 different categories of issues that it can look for. Simulator and training device issues, this is what I was talking about earlier. IFR issues, again, what I was talking about. Airports and route of flight issues. So this is things like having an airport code that doesn't exist in the database. So it could have been a typo, or maybe having a typo in your airport code and having airports that instead of being 30 miles apart are 3,000 miles apart in a 20-minute flight, implying that you were going a little faster than you probably were able to go. Cross-country issues. I already alluded to some of this. Time accounting issues. This is one check. This is, does PIC plus SIC plus dual equal total, which does not apply in the US. And so here that's unchecked because the system detected that I'm hitting this web page from a US-based IP address, and so it knew to uncheck that box. Outside of the US, that would be checked by default. Logged time issues. This is things like I transposed digits, and so my PIC time is much greater than my total time, or I'm missing a decimal point, or things like that. UTC time issues are things like I landed before I took off, which is kind of an interesting time travel if you can do it. And then, of course, there's a miscellaneous bucket. I can also, if I've already checked a bunch of flights, I can also say to only check flights since a particular date so that I don't have to redundantly go through those flights again. And if I've already done this check, it remembers the last time I did it. So it's just a quick button click to pre-fill that date. And if I've ignored an issue on a flight, because I looked at it and I said, yeah, that's okay, I can click the button to include the flights that I've previously ignored. All right, so I click check flights, and what a surprise for my demo account here that it checked 3 flights and 3 of those flights had issues. So let's take a look. I'm going to go from the bottom. It says more PIC time was recorded than total time. And I can, if I want to ignore it, I can click this checkbox over here on the right-hand side. But in this case, I'm just going to click on the data flight to view it. And sure enough, I have 1.2 hours of PIC and 1 hour of total time. Here's the issue. And so I can say, oh, I messed up the total time. That should have been 1.2 hours. And notice here in the corner, I have this little check mark. So I can always check the flight and make sure that everything is fine. And indeed, I just click that, and now it says no issues were found. And if I update the flight, now no issues that flight has gone away because it no longer has any issues. Let's quickly take a look at a couple of others here. So I have in this flight, this is in a sim, so I'm using a sim here. Total time was logged in a training device. I put that up here. I probably should not have done that. That just belonged in the ground sim field. This flight logged actual IMC time. That should have been in the simulated instrument time. And I didn't identify the training device. So I should have put in, FAA serial number 123 ABC or something like that. And it would autocomplete to previously used values. And then here's a flight I took with a safety pilot, same idea. This one, it's in a real aircraft. I logged simulated instrument, but I did not indicate the safety pilot. I did not log any PIC time or SIC time or dual time, so I'm probably shorting myself. And I performed 3 approaches, but it doesn't see any approach names fields, which I could just use this to add the approach descriptions. So that is check flights. And again, with over 200 possible checks, it's a great way to make sure that your data is compliant, is following best practices, and is defensible. And that's the most important thing about a great logbook. Okay. There's other ways that you can ensure that you're doing good logging, and that is to use automation. And let me just show you a little bit about the ways you can do that. So the first is if you go to your aircraft list, then you can specify that for different aircraft, you have different autofill. So here I have, for example, an anonymous Mooney M20J, and you'll see it says cross-fill total time to nothing, instructor time, PIC time, or SIC time. And the idea is that maybe during the week, I'm flying jets as a second in command. And so for my anonymous Boeing 737 here, I'm going to tell it to automatically cross-fill SIC time. And on the weekends, I'm flying my own personal planes, or maybe I'm teaching at a local FBO or something. And so I'm going to put PIC time or instructor time automatically. And that way I won't forget to log it. Another bit of automation is that there is all sorts of cross-fill opportunities. So if I put in a value, say 1.2 into total time, all these little gray arrows will cross-fill from the total time field, making it easier to fill them in without having a typo or missing a decimal point or things like that. Similarly, the total number of landings here, I can cross-fill into full stop day and full stop night. Now this is gonna be an error because there's more full stop landings than there are total landings, but we'll ignore that for now. And then I already alluded to the fact that it'll auto-complete to previously used values for things like simulator training device identifier or safety pilot name or any of the text fields really. But I think my favorite piece of automation, and the one that I use on a daily basis, is if you use the iOS or Android apps, you have your phone or tablet with you in the cockpit. It's got a built-in GPS. You just hit engine start, you put it in your shirt pocket or on the dashboard or on your lap, you fly, you land, you shut down the engine and you press engine stop. And in the meantime, the app has logged all of your takeoffs, all of your landings. Were they to a full stop? Were they at night? How much night flight did you have? How much cross-country time did you have? What airports did you visit? And it'll fill in all of that stuff for you automatically. All you need to do is add your remarks and the stuff that the GPS isn't going to be able to detect for you. So that's automation, and that's another way to make sure that you are logging things correctly, particularly for things like night flight. Okay, so you've used check flights and you've made sure that you are following best practices. You've got good data. Now you need to present it to a variety of entities that are going to ask for that data. Let's start with insurance companies or your flying club or your FBO. They seem to always ask this for similar kinds of questions. And in fact, this is why I started my flight book, was I needed something to help answer my insurance questions. They always seem to want to know how much time do I have in purple airplanes on Tuesdays in months ending in Y, and it's impossible to do that with a paper logbook. Probably the most useful report on my flight book, at least, is the roll up by time. This is under the training menu. And what it does is it gives you all of your totals down the left-hand side, and it then breaks them down by common time period. So what it does is I've got all time, this month, last month, this was done last year is when I took the screenshot. Year to date, trailing 90 days, trailing 12 months, previous year, all the kinds of things that insurance companies typically want to know. All right. Let's see if I come over here. There we go. The next thing is analysis. Sometimes they want to know trends of your flying. They want to know your numbers for, say, the past 5 years. And so here I actually will give a demo. I'm going to go analysis. There we go. So here I'm viewing total flight time by year. And you can see I've got my running total on this red line. Each of these bars is the quantity. If I want, I can show an average so I can see which years were above average or below average. If you've ever used Excel pivot tables, this should be old hat. You're picking a value that you want to view, say night flight, and you're picking a grouping value. I want to group that, perhaps I want to view my night flight by model of aircraft. I can do that. If I want to see my how much night flying I have by day of week, I can see it looks like I do most of my night flying on Tuesdays. I can download this into a spreadsheet, or I can view this all of the raw data that feeds the chart up above. And so it's probably more fun than important for a report, but it is a useful report. Alrighty, let's go back to the thing. Another very useful thing for insurance companies and clubs and FBOs is custom currencies. They will often ask that you keep up certain levels of proficiency. For example, an FBO might say you can rent our airplanes as long as you have flown with an instructor in one of our airplanes at least once within the past 6 months. So you can create custom currencies that will show up in your currency report on my flight book alongside your 6157 currency and so forth, and keep track of your currency that way. Alrighty, next set of people who are asking for data out of your logbook are DPEs when you go for a check ride. And they're going to look for a few things. The first is the 8710 report. Oh my gosh, is this a nightmare to do if you have a paper logbook? But on my flight book and on others, this is computed and up to the minute, always and automatically for you. It'll automatically segregate your sims and your aircraft times, which you should be doing anyhow. But and the other thing that's really useful that I mentioned this earlier in the talk is here's where it'll compute a lot of the combinations that you often need computed, like how much cross-country solo time do you have, how much night PIC time do you have, and so forth. And it will do this much more accurately than you could have, because if you think about it, you have PIC, SIC, dual, cross-country, night, and solo, And those are 6 variables. They're not quite each independent of one another, but there's something like 18 or 20 different possible combinations of those. No one is going to accurately figure out all of those combinations. Remember to log accurately all of those combinations on every flight. And if you think about it, if you had a half hour of night on a 2-hour cross-country flight, it's pretty easy to figure out that you had a half hour of night cross-country on that flight. You don't need to log it. You can just look at the flight and compute it. And so I do that for you, and any good electronic logbook will do that for you. I'm going to now show you ratings progress. And so ratings progress is under training. Yeah, here we go. So the first thing that you pick is the type of rating that you are working towards. And so right now, this includes, I put these in buckets like private pilot, instrument, recreational. This is the actual, these are the certificates really that you're earning. Rating is probably not the right word here because rating it refers to the thing that you are allowed to fly. But then under private pilot ratings, now these are ratings: an airplane single engine land, the airplane multi-engine. So here's the 61.109 requirements or part 141. I also have the European EASA ratings, or Canadian, South African, Australian, and so forth. So here, let's pull up single engine land. And so this is my progress towards the private pilot airplane single engine land rating. How, all the experience requirements that's required for that. And for each one, you can see whether or not it's been met. There's a hyperlink that goes to the source regulation. There's my summary of that source. The source is accurate. My summary is just a summary. And then you can see below it, there's a little bar that shows you how you are doing against that goal. In some cases, it'll show you, here's a cross-country training requirement. I actually did the measurement, so it's telling me that I excluded these flights because they didn't meet the 50 nautical mile distance requirement, getting back to that cross-country issue. So you can have a lot of faith in that number. Some of these are things that you have to achieve once, as opposed to sort of a thermometer kind of thing, like your night cross-country training flight. And again, it'll show me here are the night flights that look like that maybe they should count, but that didn't meet the requirements for one reason or another. And even there are some that decay over time. So for example, you have to go for your check ride, you have to have had 3 hours of flight training in a single engine airplane within the preceding 2 calendar months of the check ride. Well, I don't have that at the moment, so I can't go for my single engine check ride today, even though I got it long ago, because that is expired. You can even create your own ratings. So I can say new rating. And so this is promotion at work. So perhaps your employer will allow you to move up to a new role only when you've achieved certain levels of experience in your current role. So here you can define the milestones towards that requirement, and it will generate a ratings progress report for you. The other thing that you need when you go for a check ride is appropriate endorsements. Your instructor needs to have signed off saying you're ready for this. And on my flight book, this can be done digitally, meaning that the instructor has authenticated themselves. They have an account on my flight book, so there's no need for a scribble signature. And in that case, you just get this little ribbon that you can see here in the upper right corner of the endorsement, and that says that this has been validly signed. Or if an instructor doesn't have an account on the system, they can do a fingernail scribble. And you can also do it on paper and upload either an image or a PDF, whichever is appropriate. The FAA does accept digital signatures and digital endorsements. There's a blog post on that, and there's If you go to the FAQ for my flight book, you can see a statement of my flight book's compliance on that. The other thing that I think is really useful for things like check rides, although it's actually useful also for employment, which I'll get to in a few moments, but I want to highlight this, is flight coloring. And the idea behind flight coloring is that you perform a search, but you give that search a name, and then you give that named search a color. And this can highlight significant flights, such as check rides or angel flights or turbine time or things like that. You can also use it in a negative way to highlight flights that aren't up to your personal logging standards. So a great example of this is a pilot who uses my flight book, who flies for the airlines, as well as flying on the weekends. And whenever he logs time in a jet, he wants to mark that flight as being part 121 time. And so what he does is he set up a search for flights in turbine aircraft that are not marked as flight 121 time, and he colors them red so he knows that, oops, he didn't log this flight the way he wanted to log that. That's not a compliance thing, that's just but it is a data hygiene thing. That was just his personal best practices. So let me give a demo of how this works. So if I go to my logbook, you can see I've actually already got some flights that are colored. There are some pink flights here that are, I've got that for Light Hawk and Angel flights. So what I'm going to do is, let's say I want to find all of my solo flights, and I'm going to color those. So I'm going to do a search for solo time, click Find Matching Flights. Oh, sorry, I did that wrong. I'm not going to click Find Matching Flights. I'm going to go Save Searches, and I'm going to say solo flights, and I'm going to save and search because I wanted to give that search a name. Okay, so now this has, this is the search for solo time. But if I now go to Profile, Preferences, Flight Coloring, you'll see here's the search I just created, a summary of it. Flight has any of these properties, it has solo time. I'm going to make that, let's make that a hideous green to make it really stand out. It'll be illegible, but it should be very visible here on the screen. So now solo flights should be in green. And if I go back to my logbook, all of my solo flights you can see are now in green. And if I want to change that to be, let's say, purple, there's a nice purple, I'll do that. I come back, they're now purple. So that can be a great way to highlight flights that meet particular criteria. All right, finally, let's talk about job interviews. Typically, this is typically for airlines, but any kind of professional flying role, usually they want to know how much time, all sorts of things about how much time you have by model of aircraft. And they want to know how much turbine and jet time do you have. And they're asking for your last flight in each model and trailing 12 and 24 month times and things like that. There's, I guess, a common airline applications form that asks for a lot of this kind of stuff. And so on my flight book, there's a roll up by model. It's just right there. You just pull it up. You don't have to do any work to gather the data that they're requesting. So now you've got that data. You want to share it with your employer or prospective employer. You can kill trees. Yeah, I suppose. You could create a PDF of your flying and share that. I like that way better. Or perhaps it's best, you can actually share a live copy of your logbook and give that to your prospective employer. And the advantage of that is that if you give it to them on Monday and you fly again on Tuesday and they look at it on Wednesday, they'll see your Tuesday flight. And if they hire you on Thursday, then on Friday you can delete the link and then they don't have access to it anymore. So I'm going to give a demo of how that works. And for this, I'm actually going to go, I need to go to the live site. So I'm going to go Profile Preferences. I was on my development machine a moment ago. So now I'm on the live site and I'm going to go under Profile Preferences. I'm going to go to Sharing. And here is where I can share my logbook in more details. And so what I can do is I do not currently have any links created to share data. And I'm going to say airline application. And for them, I'm going to share my flights, my totals, and my currency. I'm not going to share my achievements or the airports I've visited with them. I click create link. Here's the link. And then here is the actual text of the link. And I can just click here to copy it to the clipboard. And now if I go here and I paste it in, I'm getting a read-only view of my logbook, including flight coloring. And you'll notice that it's got my flights, and because it has my flights, it has search and analysis. They get that. And I gave them permission to view totals and to view currency. And if I wanted to, I could edit this this link. Maybe I don't want them to see my currency. So I'm going to say update. Now they can just see flights and totals. So if I, come here. So if I now come here and I refresh the page, you'll notice the currency button went away. And if I, for that matter, come over and I delete this, now that link gives an error when they try to view it. All right, but printing is still a pretty popular thing to do. Old habits die hard. And you can actually create some very nice looking printed logbooks. So I'm finally getting to the cosmetic part well into this talk of creating a great logbook. It's important to remember, though, that electronic is not paper. They're very different things. Paper, a huge amount of horizontal real estate, which is the most precious real estate in a paper logbook, is devoted to columns, like for different categories and classes. Here's a picture from my old paper logbook. And you can see there are 4 columns for category and class. And that actually doesn't even work for me because I have some seaplane time, some helicopter time, and some glider time in addition to my single engine land and multi-engine land time. So how do I manage that? But the only reason that this even exists on paper is to facilitate pencil and paper arithmetic, because you need to keep your single engine land time separate from your multi-engine land time. And so you put them in different columns. Well, computers don't need separate columns to do that. They can keep it all separate. Per page subtotals. It's another artifact of paper. The reason you're doing it is so that when you add more flights and you want to get your totals, you don't have to start back at your very first flight. You just start back at the previous page. Computers always go back to the first flight and add it all up. They're happy to do it. And it's fast. So this is a waste. Another big difference is that the form has to be printed before any data goes into it. So in the paper world, you'll have entries that sometimes will span across multiple rows of the logbook. In the electronic world, the rows can just grow. So it's kind of, they're just different things. Of course, you also have glider logbooks and helicopter logbooks and military logbooks and civilian airplane logbooks, because the columns you want are typically different. Well, in an electronic logbook, you can customize these things or switch between layouts depending on your purpose, no problem. So currently, my flight book at least has 16 different layouts with a whole bunch of customization options that let you pick and choose what's important to you. You can choose whether or not to include pictures and signatures or flight coloring. You can adjust the number of flights per page, though personally, I recommend going with continuous mode and just having as many flights as will fit on a page. It's the most efficient use, of paper. And most of the layouts also will allow for additional columns. And you can either print it out or download it to a PDF. And this is where I go to a printing demo. So if I go to Logbook, Print View, I can choose, do I want a cover page? Do I want my headshot? Do I want totals? And if so, do I want them compact, or do I want that whole grid that breaks things out by time period? Do I want to include my endorsements and so forth? And then I can just click to open a printer optimized view of my logbook. So here it is, and it goes all the way down. You can see, yeah, so after the actual logbook, Here are the totals. Here they are again in the grid form, including the trailing 12 months and so forth. Here are my endorsements and so forth. And I can change all sorts of attributes of this. So for example, if I only want to do trailing 12 months, there we go. Now it's just trailing 12 months. I can pick from different layouts. So for example, EASA has a very particular way of laying things out. If I want to have only so many flights per page and have per page subtotals, I can do that. I can turn off those signatures. I can turn off the cover page. So I have a lot of control on this. And then what I can do when it's all the way I want it is I can click to download a PDF. So it's a very powerful set of options there. I have a QR code to a URL I'll show in a minute that goes in more depth on all of the different options there. And again, no addition errors. There are vendors that sell fancy binders if you want. And I suggest do it if it makes you happy. I will reiterate that I've had pilots that get airline jobs using binder clips or just electronic, and it's acceptable. It's not a problem. As long as the data is good, as long as people can find the data that they want to find, that's what matters. And electronic can actually be great for that because of things like flight coloring. There are binders you can get. There's a company called ProSoft Binders that'll make things look really good for you. If you have a black and white printer, then flight coloring isn't going to help all that much. So you can use those little Post-it stickies to identify significant flights. But if you have access to a color printer, flight coloring works. And I have heard that interviewers have remarked about how valuable that is to them. So here's the QR code that I promised for a deeper dive into all of the customization for the print layouts. And this is where, if this weren't a static recording, I would ask for questions. But you know something? If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me using the website, myflightbook.com. Just click on Contact Us, and I'm always happy to answer questions. It's often where I get the best feature ideas. So, thank you very much.